Hey everybody, this is Rydo and we're back to Yu-Gi-Oh! Master Duel and video game news. Today is Wednesday, April 13th. You know, having run a channel for years, it just now occurs to me that I should probably in every one of these episodes point out that I live stream every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. I definitely have said that. It's probably in the description somewhere, or I probably wrote it down, but I definitely have not been consistent. And as far as consistency can go, all I can do is promise that I will definitely try to stream every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. Times uncertain, certainly. So, yeah. New news with the Synchro Festival going on. And the app I installed to make sure that I log in every day is working somewhat. It's reminding me to log in every day on Yu-Gi-Oh! And get those daily quests. So hopefully, with 17 days remaining, I might actually even make it all the way to 30 as far as the logins. Over the past couple days, I've mostly been just playing Ni no Kuni. Ni no Kuni is, at this point, probably 12 hours into the game, I have to say it feels a little bait and switchy. It felt like it was going to be a Pokemon game, and you can capture monsters, but you can't do it in the first 10 hours. There really aren't as many monsters as it may have seemed. It felt like there would have been about 400 of them, when really there's one base monster that evolves into a second tier monster that seems to then evolve into one of two other third tier monsters. So there's probably about 100 base monsters in total. And it just really isn't a kid-friendly game as much as it looks like. On one level, it kind of does feel like it should have been an attempt at doing something like Kingdom Hearts with the Ghibli movies, and that you would have ended up in different worlds around the Ghibli movies, but that's not what is going to happen. Like, in fact, the flat 2D Ghibli animations stopped showing up. They barely showed up at the beginning anyways, and they stopped showing up altogether, I'd say about 8 hours into the game. There probably is 2 or 3 more flat 2D animations we'll see, but that'll be that. In fact, if you play Ni no Kuni Remastered and look at the trailer that plays if you just sit on the main menu, you'll see, I think, the vast majority of the game. You may notice that the shop here says it has new things, but it's not visible. The new things are the synchro packs, and we have to earn some synchro packs before we can see them, and they'll be over here under bonus pack. It's just oddly not visible, and yet it's marked, and I don't want to do anything with the solo. I do want to try to make, we'll try this deck first. I want to try to spend less time potentially doing this festival, but I definitely do want to get all the rewards also. I also should be thinking about these cards and really looking at them and trying to learn something, because I don't feel like you play quite enough or pay enough, or I personally just don't pay enough attention to really learn these cards just by playing. Yeah, there definitely is a danger that it's going to sound like I'm just absolutely hating Ni no Kuni when really it is just mediocre. Instead of hoping for the game to be shorter and more of an abridged experience to be more kid friendly, it feels like it's it's just a standard Japanese RPG, and that'll probably be my feeling on it, is that it will be an okay JRPG, but nothing that really blows me away. Of course, I've picked something that felt like it should have been kid friendly when it really doesn't play like it's kid friendly, even though I'm playing on easy mode. And if that was going to be the case, I kind of would have preferred to have just played something like Blue Reflection or a Senran Kagura game, or something that would be more anime and more Japanese, or even Dragon Quest, which has more relevancy. It probably would have made more sense to go the full haul of playing the most recent Dragon Quest, I think that's Dragon Quest X, than it would have been to play Ni no Kuni Remastered and have a very similar experience. In a lot of ways, Ni no Kuni also kind of highlights the problems with even modern Pokemon games, and that there's kind of an insanity to the gotta catch 'em all idea, and the grindiness of even a modern Pokemon game, when ideally you would like to speed things up and just play with your original 6 Pokemon you pick for your team and run through a boss rush through the gym leaders. I don't really know if there's any story in any Pokemon game other than doing the gym battles. Let's see. Okay. So, I think the idea is to do something like this, and then pick Is this a wind card? Which one's wind? Machine tuner effect. I think these are all wind. I'm gonna do this one, and then let's see. I guess do this one. Let's do this. Activate this. Yeah, I'm not sure which cards to really dismiss or get rid of. Probably that one. Then if we put that, it changes level, I guess. Okay, so what can we special summon now? A 2520 for 7, a 3028. Let's just go with the 3028. That's probably the best one. Oh. You know what? Do that. Destroy all other cards on the field. Yeah, I'm gonna have to hurry today. We have a decent amount of news. I'm starting here on noon. I really don't have a lot otherwise to talk about anyways, as far as Ni no Kuni. I'm just gonna play through it. The one thing I can say kind of nice about it is it does seem like in the 12-hour mark it's starting to open up the game a little bit more, and it is starting to get rid of Mr. Drippy as the mascot character being around just telling you what to do as much, because he was getting fairly annoying, and he does still talk every now and then, and is still fairly annoying. Also, I guess for accountability section, started building another shelf, and on my LED lighting diffusers and aluminum channels are supposed to arrive today, so I'm still working on the bookshelves project slowly. Select cards to add to your hand, whatever. But otherwise, I haven't really been doing anything, and maybe that's in part why I've been able to sleep a little bit better, and maybe that's in part why I'm streaming at noon today instead of 10 in the morning. I did know eventually we were going to get to that point where I would get back to trying to stream around noontime. I don't know if I should use P scale. Let's see. $600 attack. Sure, lose 600 attack. $2,000 probably is better. Trade that one and that one. I've taken away the whole card placement functionality in Master Duel because it's just not that useful. Attributing that monster to get higher characters did not help anything. I don't know why this card is face up on your extras deck. That seems weird. I don't even know if I have much to talk about, so I really am going to just jump into the video game news very quickly. GameDeveloper.com's website seems to have changed slightly and broken my macro, which was not the coding that I just changed. So who knows what's going wrong there. But that did require me to go and run the macro multiple times. So this game, so I have several follow list cleanup games to consider. Reptiles in the Hunt kind of looked like a Turok game. It still kind of looks like a Turok game. It's a shame that it's mixed reviewed and thus needs to leave the follow list. Yeah. We do probably need a Turok game out there, but any big game developer is just not going to go down that route of having anybody who looks like a Native American or First Tribesman ever again. We can kind of tell that to be the case because they changed Prey in such a way that they made it a sci-fi game that didn't have any Native Americans, First Tribes people. And then they haven't done anything with the Turok series since at least 5 years ago when they, I think, ported over a port, not even like a remaster of Turok. And certainly you can have somebody fighting dinosaurs without them looking like a Native American in a sci-fi way, like, and we already have that. We have Lara Croft potentially going back to fighting animals and dinosaurs, and we have not the Uncharted series, that's the name, not the name of it, well, I've forgotten the name of the game. Robot aliens with the girl named Alloy. In the second game, her face was noticeably more puffy and round. And that became a big controversy. But yeah. Horizon Forbidden West? Yeah, it might be called Horizon. Yeah, that's the name of it. So, yeah. Why risk controversy with the actual Native American when you can have a red-headed, probably of Scottish descent, girl with a cyber bow fighting robot dinosaurs? And so, yeah, Horizon Zero Dawn. That was like the absolute worst one to banish also. So moving on with the fall list cleanup. This is a August 12th, 2021 top-down twin-stick shooter. It's mostly positive, but it's still early access, so I'll have to give it more time. This game, Renee, doesn't have a release date. I don't hate the looks of it, but I don't see a real reason why this game would deserve to be on the fall list without a release date. I don't know this developer, I don't know this publisher. I'm gonna just have to risk that this game never comes out, or that I forget completely about this game. Next we have Reminiscence, which looks like it is a horror game. Free to play, English only. Is this supposed to be an attempt at a remake of the what? Finally. Might actually win here. Nope, probably not. Problem here is the tunes. Yeah, I just don't see anything here that... Even if this was a student project, I don't see anything here that makes us feel like this would be worthy of showing off. It's free to play. If Reminiscence looks interesting to you, check it out, but I don't need to highlight it. Remember When. Looks like it might be a visual novel. It's free. Play with 120 Hz or below monitor. Interactive narrative experience, one sitting, roughly 30 minutes. I just don't think there's a full game here, and it oddly would give you like all the achievements, I suspect, if you just played it. Well, you know what? On the other hand, while it is kind of not a game to have an experience where it's just two people recalling pivotal moments in the relationship and being, I think, mostly happy with each other, like that does seem oddly too positive for video games, which mostly only succeed with conflict. I could put this free game on the wish list, consequence free. And if there is a point where I start to feel more jaded than usual, which would be a lot, frankly, for me, around the amount of conflict that happens in video games, maybe I would find that game and decide to give it a go. Next we have Remedy. Let's see. First person puzzle adventure. Player wakes in the world of darkness, seeks out puzzles. 7 user reviews. Let's see what the user reviews. Yeah, I just kind of don't know if I can trust any of these reviews. They're all positive, but they may also just be bought and paid for reviews. Would not be hard to pay 7 people to write something positive about your game. And this is really one of those cases where relevancy just has to be king, because while this might be something of interest, it more than likely doesn't matter, even if it was really good. What did I just do? I didn't think I was banishing that card. I was banishing a different card. Yeah. This doesn't look amazing anyway, so that can leave the fall list. Remo Mock. Another horror game that's mixed, so that's an easy decision. Which also it's not even available on Steam. It's English with full Russian. That is an interesting thought. There might be a point where I have to go through my entire wish list and follow list and just look at all the games that are Russian language games to see if they're even available for sale. This Religion Inc. God Simulator was going to be, I think, kind of a parody of Plague Inc. or Rebel Inc. Clearly, though, people not super happy with it. It's early access from 2020. That can leave. Which that's fine too, because nobody really wants to probably watch a YouTuber or video game YouTuber talking about religion that much. Relic Guardians complete. See, in 2020, when this came out, I may have thought of this more as a throwback to like a Game Boy Advance game. Now it kind of just looks like it's a low effort cell phone port. So yeah, that can leave, obviously. It has only 2 user reviews, so it's not relevant. Relax Fly from 2021. It's yet another flying around game. Not in VR. Don't think there's enough game here. I think it is weird that there aren't more games that have this as a gameplay mechanic where you're flying around. There's plenty of adventure games where it would make sense that you could release a bird and fly around and inspect an area, but it just doesn't happen. This Relash game I'm going to give more time to, although it probably is going to get a no also. The ESA and the ESRB put out a new Q&A, or retweeted a Q&A from March 12, 2019. I don't know why they specifically would just retweet something and not, instead of putting something new out, but whatever. If anything, maybe it was in just a generic effort. It very much could have been a generic effort to try and kill stories around around the cancellation of the E3 event. Warner Media is looking for a creative services producer based out of the London, UK. So I guess if you're in that area and you think you can be Warner Media's creative service producers, check that out. I think that inevitably also highlights just Warner Media in particular still going through some hiring, firing, and just growth or evolution steps as it's being sold off and split off from AT&T, I believe. Well, so far none of these decks have really proven to be super easy to grasp, but I'm barely paying attention also. it is, I suppose, somewhat interesting to see what Warner Media thinks itself is, in that it is showing off HBO, CNN with Don Lemon tonight, Adult Swim with Rick and Morty, and TNT with, I believe, primetime NBA. And they're trying to, I think, make a little bit of a W here, but they didn't even really tilt it quite right for that to make sense. So from that listing, you can see that they are hiring people, so they're still trying, but it also potentially means that there is going to be a very different Warner Media, Warner Brothers, in the future. Although change is fairly consistent amongst TV and movies anyway, so yeah. There was no focus there, though, around video games. Even though there probably should be a focus around video games. Moving on, here's our Video Games Chronicles articles. We already talked about Sonic 2 having the biggest ever opening movie at $71 million. We already talked about Elden Ring's Cut Enemy Dream Collecting being discovered. Some of these may have been articles I talked about as I was wrapping up on Monday, since I streamed fairly early on Monday. Or it may be that Video Games Chronicles has some redundant stuff. I summon this. Set this. And then end the turn, I guess. We already talked about Sony making $1 billion investment in Epic Games to deepen the relationship in the metaverse field. We already talked about Battlefield 2042 Steam player count falling below 1,000 for the first time. And Capcom confirming a second Stadium collection via Steam pages. So maybe everything is broken again. I've got to figure out a better system here so that when they change the templates on their websites a little bit, it doesn't break the whole thing. There needs to be a better way to identify links instead of just using XPath identifiers and the HTML code, which seems to change fairly consistently. It shouldn't change this much, but it does seem like it is. Anyways, Gearbox's owner, which that's a weird way to phrase it, certainly Embracer Group, says it plans to continue its $8 billion acquisition spree. The company has made 62 acquisitions since 2020, which, yeah. If Embracer Group was in the United States, it probably would have seen a lot more legal scrutiny before it was able to do all of that. And arguably, even in the United States, there should have been more scrutiny to have Embracer Group as a foreign company be able to acquire so many companies in the from the United States. Or other countries in general. Embracer Group really is a prime example of like free world trade or open world trade just being let completely off a leash and being allowed to create a mega corporation where once there was none. Yep. Guess we'll summon this. And then attack. I also think it's not just a anti-big business sentiment to be concerned around Embracer Group being so big, or Microsoft being so big, or even PlayStation or Nintendo getting bigger. It's Embracer Group has effectively shown how the acquisitions of 62 companies has not led to 62 new games since 2020. It hasn't led to probably more than 3 or 4 games since 2020. Maybe they saved a bunch of talent. Maybe they saved a bunch of jobs, and that would be a good thing, I think, in most people's opinion. Maybe they, 2 years from now, will start to see 60 really good games coming out. But we just don't know. It's definitely feels risky to have allowed so many acquisitions. Like if you went to a pizza shop and you ordered 10 pizzas, they would make you wait, and they would make sure they served everybody else in that pizza shop also. Or if you ordered like 100 pizzas, you wouldn't be allowed to go into a pizza restaurant and order all the pizzas in the kitchen, all the dough, all the sauce, all the base material that you could, to then effectively ice out and lock out anybody else from enjoying pizzas. And that is one of the problems of potentially being part of a monopoly or a triopoly, in the case of video games, is that just buying all these companies is allowing you to buy out your competition and ensuring nobody else has talent or the ability to make more games. Even if it's not an ability that's being taken away, it may be the outward economic pressure of capitalism. And I hate to say anything good about capitalism, but one thing capitalism does do is give an economic pressure to actually deliver. If 62 companies now can just sit back on their laurels and not deliver and not make any game for the next decade, that's not a good experience. That's very much a similar experience to what I would imagine a lot of the Japanese Square Enix companies are allowed to do, which is to take way too long to make the next Final Fantasy game. Even this new Kingdom Hearts game is kind of a great example. It is kind of a great example of a game that is just going to be allowed to announce itself, and then they very possibly won't actively be trying that hard to make a Kingdom Hearts 4 for many, many years, and then eventually they'll come out with something called Kingdom Hearts 4 that looks something like the trailer. There's one of the things about Ni no Kuni that it almost feels like that's what they were trying to do, is that they were trying to court Studio Ghibli in such a way by working with them and paying them to animate a few scenes. I think they probably wanted to have bigger talks to make a Kingdom Hearts type game where in Ni no Kuni you would go to a fantasy world for the most part of the time, but every now and then you would cast a spell and end up in one of the Studio Ghibli worlds, like the My Neighbor Totoro world, or Kiki's Delivery Service world, or Princess Mononoke world, and you would just run into those characters from those movies in the same way you run into Disney characters in the Kingdom Hearts games. And I could see that being very tempting and appealing had that really happened in Ni no Kuni, but I'm almost 100% certain it's not going to happen. It would be far too late at this point, 12 hours in, for that to happen. But that also creates weirdness anyways, because in the same way that Kingdom Hearts is weird. Like, I would much prefer to play a Aladdin game from Aladdin than play Kingdom Hearts where I go to an Aladdin world and I'm still fighting little shadow ghosts and fighting with Sora. Continuing through the Video Games Chronicle news, Skywalker Saga, we already talked about having the biggest UK launch ever. Activision Blizzard has appointed a new Chief Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Officer. It is committed to increasing its number of women and non-binary employees by 50%. Increasing anything by 50% could be as little as one person, though, because if there are 2 women and non-binary employees now, you increase 2 by 50%, you get 1. I can't help but just assume this is being done in a very cynical way for show. Video Games Chronicle is not showing the lady as the first picture, but here you have a woman of color being hired, where in Activision Blizzard up until this point I have not seen anybody but really Bobby Kotick as a figurehead, as a face in the company, and Bobby Kotick is the epitome of an old white rich man. Christian Hines, her name should be at the top here. Instead of just saying you've appointed somebody new, it should be Activision Blizzard appointed Christian Hines as Chief Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Officer. This is an interesting combination of characters from Activision Blizzard, because I don't recognize this, or this, or this, or this. I do, of course, recognize Spyro and the innkeeper from Hearthstone. I don't recognize this character. This is World of Warcraft. Don't recognize this, but I assume it's Call of Duty. Don't recognize this, and of course I recognize Tracer. So there's more people here, more characters here than I don't recognize than I do. I'm not going to personally get back into playing Hearthstone, but apparently you can get a free card if you have the Amazon Prime thing, like a free standard legendary card, random, right now as part of the rewards from Amazon Prime. This. Okay, let's do this, tossing that. Let's select this. We'll go ahead and activate something here. don't think any of this is going to save me. Today might be a bit of a rainy day. I forgot to even check the weather, so yeah, hopefully we don't have any more power outages or issues in general. Breaking my computer, potentially. Yeah, as far as whether or not my computer is still broken or not, I haven't seen any problems lately. Playing Ni no Kuni, though, is not pushing the game that hard. That being said, Ni no Kuni Remastered does occasionally have some lagginess and incorrect frame pacing and just ugliness in general. I have to, though, assume that that is just because Level 5 did not know how to program PC games more than anything else. Let's see. Vehicles on Warzone's Rebirth Island have been disabled after players discover a Golden's Vault glitch. I don't care about Warzone, but check out this article if you're interested. Nintendo has bought the land next to its Japanese headquarters to build a new development center by 2027. It's Japan headquarters in Kyoto. I don't think I don't think though that Japan is still quite in its original buildings completely. It's in most of its original buildings. I wouldn't be surprised. So yeah, here we see a map of Nintendo Development Center here. This is the newly acquired land for Development Center 2, and this is the Nintendo main headquarters, and I wouldn't be surprised if they want to buy this and this. They'd probably want to stop at this street. I wouldn't be surprised if they'd like to buy all of this too. Although it's probably pretty hard to get people to leave their houses. And the land is probably super expensive. More than likely those aren't houses, they're offices, but more than likely I would also heavily suspect that since most of these headquarters and things are from 60s, 70s or earlier, you're talking 50, 60-year-old buildings. They probably have asbestos in them. They probably aren't built that well. I wouldn't be surprised if Nintendo's main HQ slowly tries to move people to Development Center 2 as a way of remodeling and rebuilding, tearing down and rebuilding the main HQ again. I think it's also worth pointing out, this is where the video games get made at Nintendo, and pretty much nowhere else. If Nintendo is going to develop anything first party and not just license it out to a third party developer, which I wouldn't be surprised if even a lot of the first party titles are heavily licensing out to third party developers that they are then just not crediting. Like, assuming Nintendo is actually making games, they are definitely being made in Japan, not in Nintendo of America or Nintendo of Europe or any other offices they may own. Well, that didn't do anything good for me. Well, this doesn't feel like I'm playing correctly. Undoubtedly, this is how festivals are going to just constantly go, is that they're going to give you a limited number of cards to play with, playing on some strategy that I just haven't ever thought of before. He's building the research and development building was founded in '79. So maybe this part of the building is not as old as I thought the main HQ is, but the main HQ almost certainly, unless they've moved, is much older than that, because they were making Hanafuda cards and other toys for many decades before Donkey Kong came around. This is weird. A company called Uniqlo, which I've never heard of, has accidentally revealed an upcoming Final Fantasy fashion line, which, okay. It doesn't look particularly that interesting, and it doesn't look particularly that good. Although, doing just t-shirts with prints is probably a smarter move than doing what you would assume when somebody says Final Fantasy fashion line, which would be to have leather shirts with like 3 belts on the arm and a big old giant sword case on the back, and because Final Fantasy is notoriously bad at fashion. You're kind of scraping the bottom of the barrel as far as video game news, though, to talk about that. Let's see. Microsoft is reportedly working on an improved Xbox Series X chip. It's unclear if the chip will be included as a revised Xbox Series X or a mid-cycle refresh. I wouldn't be surprised if it is just using different chiplets to deal with the part shortage. I wouldn't be surprised if it doesn't run, if it's clocked down to match the current chips and isn't any cooler or more efficient, really. We are more and more starting to move into an idea of swappable chiplets between different end producers of chips, in the sense that there is a standard that is growing now that I recently heard about, where TSMC, the actual chip producer, or a chip producer like TSMC, will take a design for like the RAM package, the level 1 cache RAM package in a chip that is designed for like a Intel CPU, and they'll be able to also put it into an AMD CPU, and the little chiplets themselves will be able to interconnect and communicate. It's not as fast or as good as the proprietary technologies like Infinity Fabric on AMD, I believe, is one to consider. But it may not really matter that much either, particularly in the shortage. If you could only get RAM that was originally intended for an Intel CPU, and you could only get an I/O controller chip that was intended for an AMD, and you can merge those together and create some kind of product that you can sell, they are desperate enough to do that. And it may really introduce some level of stability or consistency in how chips get designed for a small amount of time until we're on to the next technology. It would be somewhat of the next step, logically, because there were, back in the bad old days, there were definitely times when there were components that would go into a computer and it wouldn't work at all because you didn't have an Intel CPU. Fortunately, people didn't stand for that too long, but a Intel Comath processor to an 8088 chip required an Intel CPU at some level, or at least a decent enough Intel clone, it would not work with an AMD chip in the same socket, and more than likely the AMD chips wouldn't work in the same socket anyways. And I guess on another level, that's still kind of the case. We really should have been decades ago capable of putting a AMD or an Intel CPU in the same motherboard, and that has never been the case or the option. And that's really ridiculous and anti-competitive. That might be one of those cases where, had the European Union had the power to step in decades previous, we would have standardized connections for motherboards and CPUs, or standardized connections for cooling fans and things like that. Let's see. Moving on. Final Fantasy XIV's latest patch adds NPC support for solo players. Players can now play through the first Realm Reborn story without the need for other humans. I don't think that really pushes me to want to play Final Fantasy XIV, but maybe that helps new players, because I doubt too many old players really want to group up with people who are going to do the to do things they've already done. This is an interesting headline and story, certainly, as to the way the world has gone. Nintendo's eShop front page, according to Video Games Chronicle, currently features a hentai game you can, quote, you can play with one hand. Nintendo's greenlit another Switch release alluding to the explicit manga genre. Now, calling this manga, I don't feel like is accurate. Manga is black and white. This is a visual novel, almost certainly. Hentai, in case you don't know, is animated porn from Japan, for the most part. Nintendo has been Nintendo has been fairly uninterested in censoring or filtering its eShop switches, instead just going with the buyer beware concept. And Nintendo has been very uninterested in trying to maintain an idea that they are a kid-friendly console, despite the fact that they are by de facto the kid-friendly console. Honestly, if you're trying to protect your kids, you wouldn't get them a online pass, and you wouldn't let them go on the eShop, and you'd set up the parental controls. It is the game is called Hentai Uni. 4 girls, 12 beautifully drawn scenes is actually really bad number of characters and scenes, and it's probably on the front page either randomly or because it's actually selling fairly well. I would say 13 Sentinels Aegis Rim, in comparison, is more of an interesting story, because that's a really big, complicated visual novel for $50 instead of $2, that also probably isn't kid-friendly, from Japan. And in all fairness, if we looked at all these games, I bet this is a garbage game, I bet this is a garbage game, there's a decent chance this is a garbage game, and this is a garbage game too. So, of the 6 games here, the 2 most worth checking out are probably these 2, and this is probably a garbage game also. It highlights a lack of curation on their part, which is fine. And then at some level, this may be a clutching at pearls, Video Games Chronicle just trying to promote censorship, which I wouldn't agree with that. Like, if this is the game that's the Nintendo wants on their storefront, we should be proud that we live in a world and in countries where censorship is not so much allowed, and allow the game to be sold. The subscreen here says it's a puzzle game that can be played with one hand, and so I guess it's a puzzle game, not a visual novel. The art actually looks pretty good compared to this. But yeah. I don't particularly want to see anything changed here, and arguably this is not newsworthy. These kinds of games in the past have been released on Steam to no avail fairly consistently, and they should be released to Nintendo if that through Nintendo on the eShop, if that's how they want to run their eShop. They should be released on Steam, since Steam and Valve claim to be a libertarian company that isn't going to try and censor things. They should be also released on Xbox and PlayStation. The bigger story here is these types of games are actively being censored and not allowed on the PlayStation Network or Xbox Live. Even Xbox Live on PC. You could certainly make an argument that maybe they should do a better job of making better adult games, and I hope at some point we do get to that point. But until then, best thing we can do is just be happy that people can try to put out their games and sell them. It would be a slightly different story, certainly, if the game was trying to be deceptive or extremely lewd. I've found some of the games on Steam that have just straight up uncensored nudity in their screenshots to be a little much for a general video game store on Valve, and I think that should be, in the screenshots alone, those should be censored. Just in the same, but if Steam was an adult only store and all the games were adult only, I would say the exact opposite. It would be definitely a matter of context there. But even if you do go into an adult store, in most cases they don't have full-on nudity on the covers of old adult VHSs, or they didn't in the old days, back when adult VHSs existed. Moving on, as far as news, Steam Deck owner has managed to output a 4K 60 with an external graphics card. Seemingly, what he has done is use the USB-C to connect to an adapter of some sort that connected USB-C to PCI Express, and then he has separately powered the graphics card. Apple had something like that, and some other manufacturers had something like that specifically, where there was an external enclosure. Apparently this was ETA Prime that did it, which, alright, good on him. ETA Prime sometimes is a little silly and hyperbolic and a little bit too much of a hype man for his own good, in my opinion. I'm not getting to a point I'm really not getting to a point where I see how you win with this. It just seems like there are some things you can do, yes, but I don't know the full strategy here. Moving on, Video Games Chronicles says an analyst suggests that the PlayStation VR 2 will launch in 2023 due to a quote delay. Yeah, I don't know why you call it a delay per se instead of just saying shortages, but I guess maybe the analyst has some inside knowledge and is trying not to actually tell what the delay actually is. Just going to keep on activating things. $3,500. Alright, let's activate this. 3 cards. You shuffle back in this one, this one, this one. So I guess this might be the end game. Here. Destroy a card. Sure, we'll start with that one. And that one. And that one. And we'll see how this goes. I destroyed the wrong card. Alright, well I lost there. Moving on, Dead Space's creator says his new horror game is, quote, coming together and details will be revealed soon. This is the actual creator of Dead Space 1 working on the Callisto project, which was revealed in 2020, not to be confused with the reboot, remake of Dead Space, which they, I think, 100% announced and have promoted specifically to make people just forget about the Callisto project protocol. Also, though, there was a decent amount of hype around the Callisto protocol and its trailer, and I think they should just probably ride that hype. They got the word out, they got the initial boost of enthusiasm, and I just don't think they're going to have anything else that they can really show or talk about for a while. You can kind of see in the Callisto protocol that there are going to be robots and monsters, but not just necromorphs. And I don't see anything that really highlights that there will be any kind of procedural limb dismemberment as a concept in the Callisto protocol. I think it's going to be maybe more of a standard horror game, maybe with some RPG elements like the original Dead Space, and that you had 4 different weapons and you could upgrade your suit. Maybe it'll have some interesting story around it. I hope it does, certainly. But I severely doubt it's going to be I severely doubt it's going to be anything like Dead Space 3 with DLC and microtransactions and just a lot of ridiculous free-to-play elements in a non-free-to-play game. We are not making a lot of progress. I'm probably gonna have to spend extra hours playing this off screen. I kind of want to get back to playing my Nintendo Switch, play some more Pokemon Snap, and I didn't take out any time to do that last weekend, so maybe this weekend. Of course, this weekend is also Easter, so who knows. I hope the Callisto Protocol has some surprises, but not too many surprises. Like, what people really want is to feel the feeling of how they felt when playing Dead Space 1 and just entering a world that was new and exciting and having first-person shooting, zombie shooting type experience with a decent amount of horror. In fairness, though, it is also worth pointing out that there are some kind of bad sections in Dead Space 1, some bigger cinematic sections that feel a little off-putting and a little bit out of the norm. And so hopefully Callisto Protocol does a better job there. The asteroids shooting section, most notably, is the worst part of Dead Space 1. I kind of hope that the Callisto Protocol can tell a full story in one game and not have a big need to make a sequel on top of another sequel on top of another sequel, because Dead Space 3 and even to a certain point Dead Space 2 kind of ruined the standalone experience that you had with Dead Space 1 as far as what the story was, by over-explaining things. Arguably, that's the problem with a lot of the Halloween and Nightmare on Elm Street movies too, is that they've become these long-running series trying to explain everything. The Saw series, great example of just like having to explain things over and over again, or re-explain things and recontextualize things, making the original Saw movie way worse in retrospect. Although it's fairly easy to just watch the first Saw movie and not watch any of the others. Moving on with video game news, the Tony Hawk studio Vicarious Vision is no more as it completes its merger with Blizzard. The studio is now called Blizzard Albany. Now, saying it's no more is, I guess, semantics. It doesn't feel like there's people getting laid off. It was a team of around 200 people. I don't know how many of those people really even worked on the original Tony Hawk game versus the Pro Skater 1 and 2 remake. At this point, Tony Hawk is pretty old himself, so it probably would be smarter just to call the game Pro Skater 1 and 2 and not license Tony Hawk on it. I don't think that there is a new major name in skating that people would recognize. I wouldn't recognize them for sure. But yeah, this doesn't seem like people getting laid off. It's just a name change. But in a name change in a video game industry, that is a significant shift culturally. That being said, the second you got in bed with Activision Blizzard, you were ruined at that point anyways. And that's been consistently the feeling for all companies that get acquired or by Activision or Activision Blizzard, is that the talent very quickly starts to jump ship, go somewhere else. The culture that exists there all of a sudden gets changed. It is kind of funny that Blizzard is completing a merger in the midst of all of Activision Blizzard being acquired by Microsoft. I guess business has to continue going forward, but they may just be trying to also wrap up loose ends. But I just decided to banish this character. I really don't know what these people are doing. Are they playing the loner decks, or do they just have do they just have some better deck that people know about? Let's see if I banish that. See what happens there. Which negates her effect, which activates my effect. Hmm. 2,500, 2,000. See if his card can do the same. I don't know why that one put it there instead of there, but probably wouldn't matter. Let's see, moving on with video game news. Certain Affinity is saying it's working on new and exciting things for Halo Infinite. I'm sure Halo Infinite people, if there are still Halo Infinite fans out there, will be happy to hear that. Blizzard has sent out a new Wrath of the Lich King Classic survey, which maybe doesn't mean too much. They probably are just sending out surveys. It is odd to have two Blizzard bits of information. And then the World of Warcraft expansion reveal stream time has been confirmed. Blizzard will be holding an announcement event on April 19th. It will stream at 9 a.m. Pacific time, noon Eastern time, 5 p.m. British Standard Time, I guess. I don't know. I wonder if it really is more all hands on deck at the moment as far as Activision Blizzard to maintain the appearance that people are still working and still doing the same old. Not only because of the acquisitions, but because of all the controversies and all of the unionization efforts and other news around, negative news around Bobby Kotick and Activision Blizzard. Although it is also worth pointing out that the that annual event is going to be all digital again, BlizzCon, and I think BlizzCon is not too far away, so we could just be seeing people accomplish things so that they can highlight it in a presentation during the online BlizzCon stream. Ghost of Tsushima's movie has found its writer, Takashi Doshur. I don't know how you pronounce that last name. Will pen the screenplay for the Sony film. This is probably going to be a little weird if this movie ever actually comes out, and that's a big if for any movie. Because in general, people who have played Ghost of Tsushima probably already know the story. I haven't played the game. Whatever it is, it's going to be very Japanese feeling or Asian feeling. It's going to feel like it's trying to pander to Asia, China, and very possibly this movie will never even be allowed to air in China. Sony, remember, also desperately tried to make the World of Warcraft movie succeed in China, and I think it kind of did, but failed everywhere else, so it didn't make any money. Sony has been fairly desperate, more than almost all the other movie studios, trying to make profits in China, which I don't really know why. But I really would have to suspect that movie theaters in the United States would be very reluctant to have a movie called Ghost of Tsushima come out in their theaters and take up a bunch of the theater spaces. They may allow one of their smaller viewing rooms, one of their smaller theaters, to air one airing at it, maybe even a midnight airing only. But I would suspect that is probably the only way it's going to go. I don't know which one of these I should pick. Probably this. There is another problem, certainly, around the Ghost of Tsushima movie, in that the story of Ghost of Tsushima probably occurs over the course of at least 20, if not 60 hours in gameplay. So how you're going to squeeze that down to a 2-hour movie is very questionable. And that's always been the problem with most video game movies, is that it's just too much. Either too much happens or too little happens, and then the game is not that interesting. Moving on, Bandai Namco appears to be making an HD remaster of a Nintendo game. A new job listing suggests that the title is a 3D action game. This is somewhat questionable. Upgrade to one of its older Polygon titles. 3D action games from Bandai Namco. What would Bandai Namco have made that would have been a 3D action game that they were remastering. And this is a remaster, not a remake, so it's not even that interesting of a story, really. It'd be much more interesting as a remake. Should I have activated this? Should I have activated that? So it kills that. Brings that back together. Brings that back together. Draw a card. Bring this back. What can we summon now? 2100? Is that our best one? This guy's just wrecking me. Like, I'm playing pretty good strategies here, not really knowing what I'm doing, and yet he has managed to totally still create a nightmare scenario. Okay, well, I feel like this card is going to disappear at the end of the turn. Let's see. Let's see if I can look up Bandai Namco games. No, I don't think I want a list of all their games that they're currently making, because that'll just be a bunch of old games. Wikipedia would be the right source here. See also list of video game franchises. Okay. What of these games would have been kind of a Nintendo exclusive that would be a 3D action game? I doubt it's Dragon Ball, I doubt it's Digimon, doubt it's God Eater or Dot Hack, doubt it's Katamari, Namco Generations, Pinball, games like that. Maybe. Let's see. I have to keep on playing. Okay, so what can we summon now? An 1800? Suppose that's progress. Just activating every effect possible. Finally got a victory. Finally convinced somebody to surrender. Which is great because this was getting kind of ridiculous. And it is just going to be kind of ridiculous. These are all legacy pack tickets we're getting right now. And there's not really a lot of reason to buy legacy pack tickets. And that gave us a boost. We oddly seem to be getting more rewards than normal here, considering I think I've won exactly once and I'm already at 800. So either I'm just losing quite a bit, or I think we'll just stay with the blue, or we're getting more rewards. Ridge Racer, maybe, but that wouldn't be a 3D action game. Splatterhouse, that's not a Nintendo game. Tales series, no, it's not Nintendo. Could go to list of Namco games, perhaps, and I wouldn't be surprised. That's really where this is coming down to, something like a very, very old 3D action adventure game. It was an arcade game. Interesting, the music just stopped playing there. And I guess we could try and look at all the 3D action adventure games Nintendo had if Bandai Namco is remaking something for them. I just would really have to question what it would be. If I was gonna really guess, could be maybe a Bubble Bobble game. If I was gonna really guess something crazy, what if it was a remake of, what would you call Wind Waker an action game, or would you call it an action adventure game? I think you'd call it an action adventure game. But we know there are several PC ports that have come out of Nintendo games. If Nintendo wanted to hide some culpability and maybe pass the blame on to somebody else, hiring a company like Bandai Namco to instead secretly steal the code from a PC port of Wind Waker, for instance, and remake or remaster an old game, that might be what's going on here, is that Nintendo just doesn't want to work on something for legal reasons, or more likely Nintendo doesn't want to work on something because they're just not interested in working on it. Yeah. These Namco games are particularly old, so unless you were going to have them bring them in because they worked on Tekken to make a more 3D fighting game. But I don't know what 3D fighting game or 3D... It would be a 3D action game. They said 3D action. Mario Kart Arcade GP 2. That's it. Almost certainly. It's gotta be something like that that was co-produced with Nintendo. And that was in 2007. That's not a 3D action game, though. Pokemon Tournament, though, would be. Yeah, it could be Pokemon Tournament. Could be some really old 3D action game from Atari. This is really one of those examples of just wasting your time speculating. You're making a huge assumption here, or I'm making a huge assumption that it's something that Bandai Namco has worked with Nintendo before on, versus potentially it just being Metroid Prime 4. That would be definitely another tinfoil hat thought, certainly, is that Metroid Prime 4's development is just being handed over. Completely. He definitely doesn't want his spells and traps destroyed. So we should destroy his spells and traps. Yeah, there's Miss Pac-Man games unlikely to come out. I guess at a certain point too, there's Donkey Konga 2, not an action game. Mario Superstar Baseball. There's a slight question as to whether or not Bandai Namco is good or not at making games. I think they're usually pretty good. Family Circuit, Quinty. Haven't even heard of these games. This would be really weird if it is some Japanese only game that never even came to the West. Could be Burger Time. But would that be a Nintendo owned game? Yeah. I really need to be going down the list of Nintendo games to even start to see. All that's really doing is giving me the ideas of, well, here's what Bandai Namco's made before. It's worth mentioning, though, my own stupidity. Point it out when I can. I should. Not talk like Yoda. I should. It is incredibly stupid to get hyped around anything involving Nintendo at this point, or even care about what Nintendo does. Like, what could feel like an amazing announcement, like the craziest possible announcement possible, that Nintendo is hiring Bandai Namco to make a PC port of Wind Waker, or they're hiring Bandai Namco to finish Metroid Prime 4. Even the most insane possible option that I can think of, it's not really that interesting. it's not amazing news. It's not great news. It doesn't take a video game player any closer to actually playing a game. We'll know what the truth is when the announcements actually happen, and pointless speculation is really the area of people who have nothing better to talk about. And honestly, that's just not the case with me. I have plenty of video game news to cover still. Xbox Series X and S being the top selling console in March in the UK. Apparently PlayStation Plus was, quote, devastating for Oddworld Soulstorm sales, claims the creator. Lauren Lanning believes Oddworld inhabitants missed out on profits due to the PlayStation Plus deal. Yeah, I could believe that to be the case. I could believe it not being the case. What's funny is I didn't play fast enough, but then the timer also isn't all the way down on the yellow. Oddworld is just an odd game in general, so it's hard to use that as a measuring stick or a metric against any other kind of game out there. What is, I think, more interesting to point out is that we have not had anybody who has released a game or published a game on Xbox Game Pass complain about their game being on Xbox Game Pass. And we haven't had anybody on the free games of the Epic Store complain about that deal. So, something about the PlayStation Network, PS Plus offerings, and the way those were negotiated, apparently hurt the feelings of the person who made the game. And almost certainly it wasn't her decision, whether or not it was a PlayStation Plus release or not. It was probably the publisher's decision. So this might very well be a case of a publisher screwing over the developer by entering into a deal that gave more money to the publisher and didn't give as much money to the developer. Let's see if this works. Publishers of video games in particular, and probably publishers anywhere, can really screw over a developer if they want to by simply making sure or doing everything in their best effort to make it so they only that you can make it so that they only make enough money to cover the profits and expenses of the publisher and not any extra money, because publishing deals for the most part always are written so that the developer does not see any money at all until the publisher gets repaid for all the money they've put into the development of a game plus all the advertisement of the game. Now typically what you also see is cases of publishers screwing out content creators, developers, by overspending for advertising, or straight up just lying about the accounting and saying that technically the game didn't make any profit. We see this in movies all the time, where almost no movie ever makes any profit because they're screwing out any kind of actors or producers or executive producers that have points on the back end and were expecting to potentially make a few $1 million off of a movie that made $1 billion in revenue. A lot of shady Hollywood math, I imagine, could happen in video games, even if it hasn't happened so far. We haven't had too many stories of that happening, but there have been a couple of publishers certainly that have been sued. But once again, getting back to like Oddworld Soulstorm, that's such a niche game anyways. I wouldn't be surprised if this really is just a deluded developer of a game not realizing that their game was not going to sell. Like, I personally can tell my experience as far as Oddworld Soulstorm, in that I tried to play some of the older Oddworld games, tried to play 4 different ones that played slightly differently or even severely differently from each other. Could not get a single one to control right and play in a way that I would enjoy. And had to give up on this Oddworld series. So Soulstorm was not even a consideration, because I had already bought and tried to play 4 other things. Alright, let's go ahead and flip summon this and see if that does anything. Let's go ahead and summon this. See if that does anything. Let's go ahead and activate this. And I guess you tribute this one. Set this one. Can we now do something? Yes. Let's see. Moving on with video game news, the PlayStation 5 consoles are currently in stock at Game UK. Dead Island 2 could be released later this year. A journalist is claiming the game has been claimed repeatedly that the game is close to completion. Which journalist is this? Colin Moriarty? Alright. Depends if you believe Colin Moriarty or not. It definitely is at a point where certainly Dead Island 2 could come out. The Dying Light 2 came out and didn't blow people away, and there's probably going to be some small updates and improvements, but let's see. Attack directly this turn. Can we summon something else? No, I don't think I want to do that quite yet. Okay, let's see what this one does. That was nothing. Yeah, I definitely could see the idea of Dead Island 2 coming out and it being a pretty poor, mediocre experience, and that just being the end of the Dead Island series, that they're just gonna try potentially to recoup their cost and and be done with it, since it's been in development hell this whole time. Oh yay, I increased it to level 2. That was pointless. Although that might have helped at some point if I needed just one more star. Which I guess maybe I could have gotten a 12 star instead of an 11 star character. That may have actually helped. Moving on, a new PlayStation 5 firmware update, quote, improves system performance, which, I mean, that's really not news. That is the default statement people put out when they don't want to say anything. Video Games Chronicle says Sony and Nintendo will change subscription policies to avoid accidental renewals. Xbox also updated the subscription guidelines earlier this year. This is following a new measure by the Competitive Marketing Authority, Markets Authority, the UK's competition regulator. I'm not sure if these rules will change in the rest of the world, but there definitely are some laws that are pushing companies to do things better. Like the Raspberry Pi OS, or Raspbian OS, or I think it is just called Raspberry Pi OS now, has gotten rid of its default user login and password because some country, I think Germany or the European Union, is passing laws saying devices can no longer have default usernames and passwords, and that's a smart move, certainly. It makes a lot of sense to get away from that. I was a little shocked when I got my new internet service provider and the login seems to be randomized and unique for my specific router, and it isn't just some kind of like default password and login that you have to change later on. And even to connect to the Wi-Fi seemed to be a randomized string of characters. People are going to hate it, but people do need to get to the point where they are doing random passwords with uppercase, lowercase, numbers, symbols, because that's the only security that's even going to stand a chance going forward. We've just had too many unsalted hashes stolen and too many breaches happening as far as databases, and nothing short of a fairly paranoid scheme as far as using passwords for even things that aren't even that big of a deal is acceptable anymore. And we are at the point where a lot of security-minded people are pushing for the idea of completely getting rid of the concept of passwords, which maybe that would work, maybe that wouldn't. There have been attempts around going to fingerprints and Face ID and two-factor on top of a password, which two-factor as a concept still probably requires a password or some other factor. But all of those are not so easy to implement. Moving on, Video Games Chronicle says Knights of the Old Republic remake studio Aspyr has been acquired by Beamdog. This is the MythForce and Baldur's Gate enhanced developer joining Saber Interactive's subsidiary. Which, yeah, that definitely is just another indication of acquisitions happening. I don't recognize any of these hands that they're showing the picture for. I don't even recognize this game MythForce that they've decided to play for the trailer here. This is the thing Video Games Chronicles is getting really crazy around, is that they are just putting trailers of some random game in every article, whether it's really connected or not. Interestingly, this MythForce game has that soft CG animation style that Ni no Kuni has. That being said, the first person shooting here feels more like something you would do in Overwatch than more of an Overwatch game than a Japanese RPG game. 4-player online co-op. That is something that arguably should be in something like a RPG game by default too. It's just to have online co-op. Although I wouldn't be surprised if not many people actually have real interest in having other players play with them in a JRPG or an RPG in general. If I had 3 other people running around Fallout 3, for instance, that probably would not catch my attention much. Moving on, Bethesda has announced an online-only QuakeCon event in August. QuakeCon, I guess, being separate from BlizzCon? Or have they just gotten away from calling it BlizzCon completely, and is it just QuakeCon? Or are there 2 of them? There may very well be 2 events. Of course, neither one of them seem like they're going to actually be physical events. In general, I think physical events are going to become fewer and far between even after there is a near complete elimination of COVID and pandemics. I think that we are just looking at people realizing that they want to work from home, they don't want to go to conventions. I could see a resurgence of conventions, certainly, if you are not going out to places, but that also kind of requires there to be finances, and it seems like inflation is super high in the United States, and being able to afford extra little vacations is going to become a struggle for a lot of people. Plus, a lot of these video game conventions, they always tried to be something that they never quite could be, in my opinion. And that's why I've never really felt a big desire to go to any video game convention. Never was really interested in going to E3 or BlizzCon, QuakeCon, Gamescom, even a PAX. PAX arguably maybe your best bet, considering it's more of a base of focused around people just having fun and playing board games and other things. But even at that, I'm still not sure I'd ever really want to go to PAX. Where, in contrast, you just it's a more established thing. It's a more interesting thing to go to, say, a pinball convention and play pinball tables that you can't play anywhere else, or play a lot of pinball tables you can't play anywhere else, or to to go to like an anime convention, or even maybe before there was a lot of the maybe before Comic-Con got so big, I could have even seen I could have seen something like Comic-Con being potentially interesting to go to. But nowadays I really wouldn't want to go to Comic-Con. anime conventions have cosplayers, and that's something fairly unique. And a lot of anime is frankly just hard to get if it's old and out of print, and a lot of anime collectibles are hard to get, and that's just not the case as far as video games. Like the same Funko Pops at sale at a video game convention are more than likely at sale at any random GameStop. There's just no scarcity there. There's no niche audience there. Video game players are the majority, not the minority. I definitely don't personally care about any kind of esports or anything like that, so that wouldn't be something that would motivate me either towards going to a video game convention. Moving on, we've got a decent number of games that have come out on Steam. All Quiet Roads here looks like it's a traffic simulator game. Not really something that looks amazingly interesting. To me, it's not very visually polished. Medusa Frontier looks awful, so we can say no to that. Rob the Bank also looks awful. Apparently it's a VR game. I'm shocked at how awful the graphics look if that's supposed to be VR. The Giant Torridge Island doesn't look like enough of a game. Mad Murder's Mystery Pie Shop looks like it's probably a low effort troll joke game. We are just going to go through a whole bunch of garbage games probably, which is fine. We could certainly save some time. It's already been 2 hours. This Winter and People doesn't have good enough screenshots to tell me what it is even. Apparently it's a tower defense game, looking at the tags. Hardball Wiki looks like nothing of interest. I really wish I could adjust some of this still. Trails of Illusion looks like it's probably either a Japanese or a Chinese RPG game. Free Japanese and Chinese, but doesn't support English, so obviously no. Glass Box. Looks like it's a 3D kind of labyrinth ball rolling game. Kind of feels like a mobile game port. I don't think there's enough game there though for me to want to play that, particularly for $5.99. Third-party EULAs too still being an issue. I really haven't been talking about the third-party EULAs, end-user license agreements in games, but they are still very prevalent and kind of ridiculous. That would be something I kind of would be okay with Valve cracking down on and saying you really need to be a top tier seller, you need to be an EA or a Ubisoft before you're allowed to have a third-party end-user license agreement. That wouldn't be very libertarian of them, certainly, but it would stop a lot of people adding a bunch of nonsense end-user license agreements. Although, in fairness, this game Spaced Out doesn't look that interesting either. There is a better solution to end-user license agreements that really should happen, and I guess contact your local state representative or federal representative. If your country, the United States in my case, passed a law saying that judges could throw out end-user license agreements in favor of a very standardized registered license agreement, a registered contract, and hear any disputes or trials on the basis of a standardized registered contract instead of a third-party EULA, it would probably help unclog the court system, the courts, which they always say the courts are clogged. Maybe it's better that the courts are clogged. This dungeon and burglar, I still don't think it's something that interests me. The heads-up display here is too big. If I'm going to complain about something, yeah, it's just too big of a text. But yeah, if courts could set more precedents on in-user license agreements and throw out a bunch of what are effectively close to slap lawsuits, or anti-slap lawsuits, and there might be something that could happen there. The fact that anybody anywhere can write any kind of nonsense on a piece of paper and it potentially by default considered to be a valid contract is kind of ridiculous. You can't do that so much with trademarks. You can basically do that kind of with copyrights. But yeah, even if there was just a financial burden, if you had to actively spend $300 to register an end-user license agreement with the government and then have it be evaluated for it to be valid, that would also be a way to get around these ridiculous end-user license agreements. And the main goal to work on any of that and improve it at all is simply because we would like to create a world where people can't just overwhelm you with a wall of text and people aren't just emotionally being manipulated and mentally being manipulated to agree to end-user license agreements without reading them and actually understanding what's in them and actually agreeing with them. Here we have a game on Steam called Retro 3 Kingdoms Special Edition, which looks like it's probably a Chinese game. Not particularly interesting. Even when you do have a third-party account, or third-party EULAs is what I'm talking about. When you get a game like that and purchase a game like that, very often there is not even a checkbox that you're clicking that it explicitly says you have read or you agree to those third-party EULAs. Not when you launch the game, not when you play the game, not when you purchase the game. Frankly, how Valve is being allowed to get away with that is kind of questionable. Okay. That. And then that. And then this. And that. Normal. So one of these spells, not that one, was a spell I would have wanted to have gotten, but I didn't get it. Although, I don't know if end-user license agreement, in all fairness, are the biggest problems plaguing people. People signing away their rights is a problem, but it's a problem that most people don't ever feel the pinch of, whereas there are plenty of other things that are big deals, certainly. It's kind of hard for a video game company to really screw over somebody with an end-user license agreement, where loans and credit cards and just employment contracts are much bigger deals. Let's see. Moving on, we have a game called Arcade Squad, which looks like a fly around space game of no particular interest. Yeah, we have a Chinese Go game, it looks like, but fairly small tables and not very visually polished. Plus, it doesn't support English, so no. Yeah, we have a game called Hit Him, which looks like it's a political game that is straight up simulating violence on... Is this Putin, or is this supposed to be Boris Johnson? I'm not sure. I guess that probably is supposed to be Putin. Which I don't think Valve needs to go down that direction. Yeah. The idea of promoting violence on real people, politicians, is dangerous much more for anybody playing the game than it is for the politician. So, yeah. That definitely is not making it to the follow list. Here we have a game called Uragun, which looks like it's a top-down twin-stick shooter. English, Spanish, Polish, $14.99. Well, I'm not seeing anything particularly amazing here. I'm going to be generous and put this on the follow list. Let's see. Epiphany City. Looks like it's maybe a box-pushing puzzle game, or just a... yeah, it seems like you have to push things to solve puzzles to leave the room and go to the next room. Might be something to that. I'll give that a follow and see what people think. It's mostly positive now, so actually I should just be putting it on the follow list, on the wish list as I speak, but... We're gonna be able to do anything here? Nope. Yeah. 97% positive, has over 35 reviews. It's not an early access. There's really no reason to leave that just on the follow list. We can just put it on the wish list. What's interesting is that it has so many positive reviews when it's only been out a day. But I think that's also because it's been on itch.io already. Either that, or it just paid for a bunch of reviews and then my whole system is out the window, because apparently at that point people can pay for reviews and trick people. I guess maybe that would be the counter argument, certainly, to immediately putting it on the wish list, but I don't really need to do that either, because I can put it on the wish list and then double check the reviews, and I always do before I buy a game anyways. And I definitely am at a point where I'm not expecting to really buy a lot of games this year, so Epiphany City is probably not going to be one of them. Just change that to defense, I suppose. Next we have this game called Lost Contact, which it's not quite visually polished enough. Yeah. It's a VR game, and I think that's a problem. Certainly when the visuals aren't that good. We'll ignore the fact that it also is Russian language, but just the visual polish needs to be better. We have a game called Biota, which looks like a Game Boy game, or inspired by a Game Boy game. 2D Metroidvania action platformer game. The visuals really kill it for me here, though. I just don't want to play a game that looks like a Game Boy game. Even if it is going to jump around in color palettes every now and then. The lower resolution, I don't think benefits people and players. And the lower color palette, I don't think benefits players. I definitely know that there are some people out there that are just incredibly nostalgic for anything that looks Game Boy-esque, but I'm just not one of those people. Here we have a game called Annie in the Art Gallery, which, yeah, this doesn't look like much. A psychological horror game of some sort, kind of poorly drawn. It feels like it may very well just be a low-effort clone of that game Ib. It's free and it's English only, so I don't even know what they're really doing at that point. Come on, activate something. I just have a whole bunch of one-star things, and apparently none of that is merging, or this is causing problems. Yeah. I think I've messed up here by playing that trap card. Here we have a game on Steam called Astral Ascent, which is apparently a roguelite. Looks very visually polished, unlike most games, which maybe I'm getting bitter at this point. At least the trailer does. Yep, this actually looks like something. I believe Giant Bomb also spotlighted this, or quick looked at this. It's early access, but I'll give it a follow. I don't think what we could say, though, is that with one potential, maybe new indie darling type game coming out in early access, that we are hitting a point where we're going to start seeing a new game of actual importance coming out every couple of weeks or every week. I wish that was the case. In Astral Ascent, you're fighting and trying to defeat, I think, the 12 Zodiac, or representatives of the 12 Zodiacs, which at a certain point makes a question about Gemini, whether there would be two people there or one. But yeah, it sounds like a good premise, at least, to start with. Here we have a game called Dimension Fight, which doesn't look particularly that good. It's Chinese only, so no. Here we have Maze to the Old Castle, which looks like garbage. Although, I will probably applaud the forest growth here, not just being very generic forest growth for a maze, and rock fixtures that aren't just generic straight walls with rock textures on them. There was definitely a time about a year and a half ago where we were seeing very, very consistent cases of people just using a asset flip engine to make mazes, and you would just see these absolute awful mazes getting sold one a week practically. Let's see. Let's see what this does. Moving that one level up, don't think helped. All that praise being said, this screenshot looks pretty generic as far as a maze, and a maze in general is never just going to be that interesting. It is kind of surprising that there aren't more hedge maze type experiences in more mainstream games, but it doesn't happen. Here we have a game called The Lost Oregon City Gold, which seems to be live action, seems to be somebody using their own kids as actors, which might be a little exploitative. Color balance on this guy is way off from this guy. Yeah. I really have to think Steam should not abide these kind of low efforts. Like, at a certain level, if I tried to make a full motion video or live action video, visual novel, I probably should not be allowed on Steam. Steam Direct allows for basically anything to be on Steam. But I personally think either you become a parent who very quickly, or who not very quickly, eventually realizes that they have significantly affected their child by involving them in something that is permanent and putting them out on the internet to be seen by all, or you become a parent who absolutely doesn't care one bit and is perfectly fine with exploiting your children. Like, even if you do a kind of great thing, it doesn't feel like a great thing all the time for the kids involved, and it really should. The default, in my opinion, is you absolutely must bend over backwards to protect the privacy of your children for as much as possible. So much so that the internet should basically not even know they exist until they're somewhere around 18 to 22. Yeah, so I definitely would say no to this game. On one hand, it's not good looking, but on the other hand, I definitely don't want to have to criticize, as a video game critic, little kids in the game. Next we have a game called Bomb Pong, which looks like garbage. Here we have a tower defense game called Comrade Quack, which actually does look a little visually polished, but it's kind of all over the place too, in that you're going with the communism joke, you're going with tower defense, and you're going with a duck joke. That's a little too much. Just trying to throw everything in, including the kitchen sink. If this somehow works, I would be shocked. Let's go through some of the Gematsu articles. There's quite a bit open. I don't know if there isn't some redundancy here, though. We have games coming out in Japan this week. 13 Sentinels, Aegis Rim, Battle Spirits Connected Battlers, Skull the Hero Slayer, and Winning Post 9. I think we may have talked about these games already. The game Metal Max Xeno Reborn launches June 10th in the West. This RPG launches in the West 2 years after the Japanese release. This was that weird kind of tank looking game, despite the fact that it definitely does not look like a tank game. If I recall correctly. Yeah. You have like these weird tanks as part of it. And the visuals on it just never looked that polished. Clearly, they didn't have a lot of budget if they are releasing a game 2 years later. And I have to assume that there was a Metal Max Xeno before, and this Reborn subtitle indicates a game that is being rebooted, remastered. Or, yeah, probably rebooted and remade. That being said, the fact that I don't recognize the name indicates it's not particularly that relevant. And then we had already talked about some of the people who worked on Braid, Cardo, and Ethereal, establishing a new studio called Furniture and Mattress. Nothing really big to say around that, though, considering the actual people who were coming together arguably aren't really the most recognizable names. And I'm not sure any of them quite have leadership roles and management roles. So this might be a very weird company that has 3 people in it and nobody that can really do the accounting, do the payroll, things like that, or just be the leader. We already talked about the Capcom Fighting Collection pre-order trailer. If you want to check that out, that's available. So this does give me the feeling, since this is April 11th when this came out, that maybe my macro is broken, but maybe not, because I ran the macro on April 11th, and it is very possible that most of the news just came out after that point, since I ran it so early in the morning. Well, we aren't making a lot of progress here, but I'm kind of shocked I'm even at 1450. Capcom Arcade's second stadium has been announced for the PS4, Xbox One, Switch, and PC, according to Gematsu. Die and Retry first-person shooter War Stride Challenges for PC launches in early access on April 19th. The idea of a game genre called Die and Retry seems like an odd description. It is catchy, certainly as a phrase, though, for what you would probably just call a rogue-like. And it probably makes more sense to use a phrase die and retry instead of saying rogue-like. Because you don't probably have to understand what rogue-like means otherwise. Okay. I'm Not sure what we're supposed to be summoning. Let's see. Is this a continuous spell? Summon this. Activate this. Monster Reborn. The other guy? Not yet. No, let's just leave it at that. See if this blurred out trailer shows me anything interesting about this game, West Ride. It does seem like it is more of a race and parkour game, so describing it as a roguelike very possibly is the wrong way to describe it. That being said, I don't think die and retry is the right way to describe something like that either. I would call it more of a parkour game. Moving on, BlazBlue Cross Tag Battle for PS4 and PC adds rollback netcode on April 19th. I'm sure fans of the fighting game will love that, assuming it actually works. This is probably one of those examples of a game that if I ever did get around to actually covering it, my experience and my criticism of the game would be fairly different from somebody who played it on day one. And I haven't really found a great way to figure out whether updates or changes have happened in games. Certainly playing the Game of the Year version of Fallout 3 gave me a different experience than playing the original version of Fallout 3 slightly. Not really enough of a different experience, I think, though, to justify making a special announcement around that. My hope always is that things would be better, not worse. But you never know. It might be a case where things get worse with updates. Let's see if this works. If I could turn this to 0 attack and then attack it. Okay. Reduce level. 800 attack. Okay. Do this. Banish this. Right. See if Monster Reborn can save me. Can I steal his characters? Yes, I can. Maybe I can. Oh, that sucks. I've lost again. Let's see. Komatsu says the Made in Abyss binary star falling into darkness has detailed the game modes, a Hello Abyss and Deep in Abyss. This not too different from Ni no Kuni, looks like a kid-friendly JRPG, and you really would have to know that Made in Abyss is not kid-friendly. Otherwise you definitely run into the danger of people thinking it is. Visually, it definitely looks like. There is a possibility, though, that the game actually is kid-friendly, even though the anime and the manga it's based off of is not kid-friendly. Although, I kind of question that because the entire premise is kind of centered around some like child labor, not kid-friendly concepts. And spooky monsters. Yep. It would be kind of ironic if Made in Abyss came out, a Made in Abyss game came out for the PlayStation simply because Jim Ryan or somebody else at Sony of California did not know that it was what it was about. Doing that wouldn't have helped me anyways. Is this a special summon card? I don't think it is. Moving on, a game called Witch on the Holy Night for PS4 and Switch launches in December in Japan, and it includes English subtitles. This probably is an RPG game? Nope. It's a visual novel game. Gamatsu says Danganronpa version 3 Killing Harmony Anniversary Edition is now available for iOS and Android. I don't think I still haven't gotten around to buying Danganronpa 2, so that would be something I probably would try to focus on getting next time I actually buy some video games. Let's see, Line Monster Rancher has been announced for iOS and Android, and Line : there makes me assume that that I just got wrecked by something with 6,500 attack. This line in the title makes me assume that this is from Line Corporation, which Line is the makers of a popular kind of chat app and payment app in part 2, I believe, in Japan. So they've paid to be involved. Line Games was involved with the mobile game Destiny Child that I play still to this day and play a lot of, but they are no longer involved. They were in charge of kind of the launch of the global version of the game for the first couple of years, and in all fairness, those first couple of years are probably the worst point in Destiny Child Global's experience, because that's when all of the limited time crossover characters were included as promotions, and now anybody who missed out on those limited time events can never ever collect those characters and can't have a complete collection. So much so that I would be more than happy to just screw out some people and remove the collab characters completely from the game. It would be kind of weird, certainly, and it would almost have to happen as part of a curation of eliminating some other characters that aren't bad but aren't particularly that interesting. Like, you'd have to call it like graduating or retiring, and just retiring. If they retired about 100 characters in the game, that of the worst characters that nobody plays, there might be something to that. As for this Monster Rancher game, it could be good, it could be bad. Well, probably won't be much of anything. Let's see, Nacon and Rogue Factor have announced an action-adventure game called Hell Is Us for PS5, Xbox Series, and PC, due out in 2023, which is age-restricted. This is a spin, certainly, on the phrase "Hell is Other People." Looks like there might be something to it as an adventure action game. But in a lot of ways, it kind of has that same feel as Death Stranding did. And Death Stranding is kind of a mess of a story, and I could see Hell Is Us being a mess of a story also. Melty Blood type Lumia has Powered Seal versus Red Arcueid and Mario Gally Bastinho versus Roa gameplay. So that's like 4 different people that they're showing off as far as characters fighting each other. Yeah. So check out those videos, I guess, if you're interested. This is going to get really ridiculous if I keep this text like this, because it can just go down lower and lower. It would make a lot more sense for this to only wrap around if there wasn't enough room. Fire Emblem Warriors 3 Hopes Mysterious Mercenary trailer is available if you want to check this out. So the vast majority of these Gematsu articles were new. EU Din Chronicle Rising launches May 10th on basically everything, according to Gematsu. Yeah. This is definitely not the type of RPGs I'd like to play. But the problem is, there's a decent chance that the dialogue and the gameplay might be better in a smaller, flat 2D RPG than a 3D RPG. There may just not be enough budget out there to make a good, fully voice-acted 3D RPG game. Even Zelda games, I guess, in a lot of ways, are not fully voice-acted, and like, I don't think Breath of the Wild has Link saying full lines of dialogue. It's kind of shocking when you think about how much consternation there was around the fully voice acting happening in Lego TT games, but really they were kind of breaking grounds. Like Mario in Mario Odyssey, I don't think he talks the whole time. I have Mario Odyssey, I haven't started playing it yet. I don't think the Splatoon kids are talking all the time. Yeah. And not all of those are RPG games, certainly, where there would be a lot more talking and dialogue, but come to think of it, something like Mass Effect and Western RPG games may be the only games that have full voice acting in them. So, while my standards are high and I don't think I'll be knocked off my demand for full voice acting on RPG games, I may just need to do a little more research and realize that there just aren't any games out there to satisfy that desire. Moving on, Bugsnax is coming to Xbox Series, Xbox One, Switch, and Steam alongside a free content update called the Isle of Big Snacks on April 28th. Now, I don't know what happens at the ending of Bugsnax, but it sounds like it's a pretty permanent ending. So this content update is going to be kind of like a side quest that happens in the middle of the events of the game, as best as I can understand. I'm not trying to spoil myself on the story. Probably will get around to playing Bugsnax. I may already own it even, which this gives me a great excuse to not play it so far. Let's see, moving on, Super Robot Wars 30 has a free update and DLC expansion pack being announced, which I assume this is a mech game. JRPG, strategy RPG. Alright, let's watch the Blur trailer. I see mechs. I see anime guy and anime girl. I see a lot of nice attack animations and a lot of dialogue. Not really seeing any gameplay though. Anything that I would expect to be gameplay. The Super Robot Wars series, if I recall correctly, is the series that has multiple robots and super robots and mechs from different Japanese series all together fighting each other. Okay. Let's try this. Just trying everything possible. Guess you do this one. That's the best we can do. Let's see. Moving on, Gamatsu says Cook Serve Forever has been announced for PC. I assume this is a sequel to Cook Serve Delicious. That being said, it doesn't really feel like it is. Doesn't really feel like the same game. They're calling it an all-new intellectual property from the creators of Cook Serve Delicious. But yeah, definitely looks like a different kind of game. I don't know if a company really needs to establish itself as being the company that makes games about food all the time. That seems an odd niche to paint yourself into. Let's see, let's go through some more games that came out on Steam. So we have one called Shy Eye Labyrinth, The Incredible Mystery. Looks like it's maybe something, but I would lean towards suspecting it's not anything of interest. But I'll give it a follow just to be careful. English and Czech, $8.49. So we have Super Splash 2 Brothers, which looks like it's an attempt at a Smash Bros. Clone. using some kind of weird looking 3D models of characters. I don't really recognize any of these characters. They kind of just look like generic, poorly animated people. So yeah, that doesn't really catch my attention. The fact that it's free sounds kind of ridiculous too. Let's see. Next we have a game called Symphony, which might be something as a 3D platformer. This is really one of those games where people would have to play it and review it for me to be certain, because it also could be absolutely nothing. $26.99 is particularly expensive, and oddly it supports English, Japanese, and German, which is not a combination we see too often. Next we have Peasant Tower Defense, which being a tower defense game we can immediately ignore. And then Blast Brigade versus the Evil Legion of Dr. Creed. Looks like it's probably a precision platformer, but it does have a decent amount of visual polish to it, and I'm not sure precision platformer versus platformer really doesn't apply here. I do see a couple of screenshots where you're jumping through saw blades, but I see a lot of screenshots here where there aren't really that many spikes. This is rated very positively already. It's not an early access. Came out April 12th. Yeah, I do think I made a mistake putting the game already in the wish list. I think going forward things need to sit on the fall list and wait until you get to the next fall list cleanup to check. This game Lucky Gem looks like it's some kind of Chinese lewd. They're calling it an idler and a dating sim all in one. It looks like there's some free DLC that probably uncensors things. Yeah. It definitely, Lucky Gem definitely doesn't look like anything of good. This is an interesting description here. The game may contain content not appropriate for all ages and may not be appropriate for viewing the work. Sexual content, general mature content. All characters are over 18 years old. That's all fairly standard. But then it says also it does not contain sexual assault, non-consensual sex, drug or alcohol abuse, self-harm, or suicide, which really makes it sound like they are going through a list, certainly, of things they think it doesn't contain, or that they know it doesn't contain. One monster in control. Special summon this. If this works, I'll be surprised. Let's see. Next, we have a game on Steam called Maritime Calling, which narrative-driven RPG as a pirate. I might be up for something like that. I'll have to give it a follow. Yeah. This could be certainly very, very boring. But there might be enough of an experience here. It might be something like FTL, where you're going from port to port in a roguelike experience. I don't know if you really should have, but the opponent surrendered there. It is noticeable that in this festival, there are more people willing to just surrender again, instead of making me really struggle. Like, I'm at 2000 right now, and we've been going about 3 hours. If we could get down to if we could get to 2500 out of 20,000, like, or 22,000, that's not crazy. And we have until the 24th to claim rewards, and we have until the 21st to play. I still think it would be prudent to play a little bit off screen, but I'm not feeling a mad rush. It's definitely not play non-stop for an entire weekend. Next we have a game on Steam here called Ragnarok The Lost Memories, which actually looks pretty nice visually, and yet oddly is mostly negative. Wonder if that's because it's too short, or if it's because it's got a card game mechanic and people weren't expecting that, or if it's just a terrible game. Free to play with in-app purchases. I bet it's the monetization that's the major problem here. I don't know how you make an RPG game or a JRPG game, something that looks like this, and make that free to play. It says start now for free, so I would suspect what that really boils down to is you can do the first couple of chapters and then you have to pay, and people get upset about that. And I can understand that too, because that is definitely bait and switchy. Here we have a game called Friend Sim 2, which I don't think there's anything here that would want me to put this on the follow list. Looks like a kind of weird visual novel, and I can't help but suspect that Friend Sim 1 was released relatively recently. If this is April 12th, Friend Sim 1's not even listed from this developer. Yep. I feel like I can skip this and be fairly safe about it. Here we have another game tagged sexual content, nudity, hentai, and this came out the 12th, so it's definitely not being held back for a weekend at that point. This Be My Girlfriend's game. It's obviously a low effort asset flip garbage game, Chinese game. It's using 3D models, so the hentai part of that I don't really feel like is accurate for what most people think when they're thinking hentai. Like, 3D is not the way. It would be flat 2D images. The actual game looks awful. $1.55, English, Chinese. Okay. Play this. Summon this. What's funny is the game that's tagged with sexual content claims only to have mild violence and a little gore. So I imagine this is just straight up tag abuse or lying through tags. Moving on, we have a game called The Atlas Mystery, a VR puzzle game. Really, at this point, I don't believe I'm ever getting VR, so I kind of don't even care about this. I'll give it a follow, just to try to be fair, but I feel like today I am one step closer to just removing all VR um, VR games from the fall list than I was yesterday. Um, more than likely, there will just never be a tipping point, though, and it will be more of a case where VR at some point does become actually valid, or a valid option. Special summon this. Let's see. Target one monster you control and one card on the field. Special summon this card from your hand. If you do, destroy them. Let's see. If this card is normal special summoned, you can banish one light monster from the ground. Let's see how this works. Yeah, I think that's as good of a play as possible here. Moving on, we have a game called Hidden Harbor Top-Down 3D, which just looks like a hidden object game. Doesn't look terrible, but I don't think I'm going to go down the path of hidden object games in this format either. Like, hidden object games in general are still too simplistic as an idea to really try and show off any. I may show off one that's really, really good, but I doubt that would be the one. Next we have Escape from the Deathmark Dungeon, which looks like a Diablo clone of no real polish, so we can say no to that. And then we have Wind Angel Challenge, which is a shoot 'em up. We have not been seeing a lot of shoot 'em ups lately. Not my type of game, however. Then we have Quad Dice Defense, which looks like it's a tower defense game that uses dice in some way, but it's still a tower defense game, so I'm not interested. Let's see. Definitive Revolution. Let's see. We have a game here called Merge Cats, which is apparently an idle game. Doesn't look particularly interesting. We have a game called Escape Leah. Trigger warning on seizures, I guess, or seizure warning on the flashing there. Well, for the flashing alone, I'm gonna say no to that game. Then we have another sexual content, nudity, first-person shooter game. Like, oddly though, this time, I'm not seeing a single indication that there's any sexual content in the game at all. It really just looks like an asset flip first-person shooter. I'm seeing nothing. And again, it's a Chinese game. Oh, I guess maybe we see this character at some point. Light blood cartoon style blood spouts while attacking monsters. Talk to girl during the task. There will be provocative, suggestive sexual topics. Please visit again with your brother's permission. I have no idea what that is supposed to mean in English. We have a game called Border Collie Blaster, which is a low effort side-scrolling shooter kind of joke game. We have something here called Assassini, which is a visual novel text-based horror game. Does seem to have some level of grotesque body horror to it. There might be something to that. Like, if you had told me that this game was Dead Space, the Dead Space the visual novel, I might consider it. English and Russian languages, we'll ignore that. And then we have a game called Life of Pepe or Life of Peepee, take your pick, which looks like garbage. And I don't know why they're comparing that to Lego City Undercover as a game. It doesn't look anything like that. We have Car Detailing Simulator, which detailing a car is effectively just washing and waxing a car inside and out. And that is effectively doing somebody's job. And I've said it multiple times before, I have no interest in playing a game that is just doing somebody's job. That never is going to be fun. Next we have a game called Rift Adventures, which it's a little too pixely, but I'll make an exception and give it a follow. Actually, it's already on the follow list. Which tells me actually I have now made it back to the second follow list cleanup that I accidentally launched. So we'll go back to the Gematsu article since we still had some of those. Beamdog announced a first-person fantasy roguelite called Myth Force for PC. We already looked at the trailer of this game, but it was in a different article from Video Games Chronicles, I believe. Might be something to this. I guess the question really is just, can you play this as a single player experience, or are you going to have 4 people on your side? Are you effectively making a game like Gauntlet that really plays a lot better if you have multiple people playing at the same time? Let's see. Next, Gematsu has an article. Steel Rising has been delayed to September 8th and has 6 minutes of gameplay. Steel Rising was this game where you play as this kind of marionette, French marionette, mechanical character, and kind of had a feel of, I guess you might say, Dark Souls, with maybe some more visuals around Bloodborne, or even maybe Dishonored in part. And through the blurriness you can see that ridiculous face of the mechanical. Yeah, this may just be the future, certainly. That we may just see all RPGs go this direction, with parkouring and jumping and dashing and more bespoke fights and more bespoke enemies. That might be the way to do things. It would be very weird if all of a sudden players 10 years from now have to go, boy would I love to play a game like Final Fantasy 3 again, with that turn-based gameplay and that 2D pixel art and the 600 hours potentially of grinding you need to do. Yeah, that would be interesting if we saw JRPGs and RPGs die. That does remind me, though, there might be one game out there, and it's kind of ridiculous I didn't even consider this. I consider playing it. Nier Automata. Nier Automata might be mostly voiced. I don't think it's fully voiced. In fact, it may not be any more voiced than anything else. But at least Nier Automata would have an interesting story. It's a very relevant game to play. The only real question is, do you want to go back and play the original Nier game first? I'm not sure it really matters. It would be a very easy parachute move for me too, to play like Nier Automata and say, okay, I played Ni no Kuni as a kid's JRPG, I played Nier Automata, I played Fallout 3 as a Western RPG, I've dipped my toe into 3 different types of RPGs, and at that point I could say I'm done with RPGs for a while, or at least Japanese RPGs for a while. Although it's kind of hard to be actually done with RPGs, since RPG elements show up in almost every game. Moving on, Gematsu has an article here. Square Enix has trademarked a game called Leneath in Australia, and Bandai Namco has trademarked Fishing Spirits and Ace Angler in Canada. So, some kind of fishing game for the Switch, obviously. That wouldn't be terrible. And this would be obviously a Valkyrie profile continuation game. Yeah, I'm a little surprised there isn't already a fishing simulator with the Switch. If anything, I think the Switch and the Joy-Cons prove themselves to be a gimmick nobody wanted. And that's why the Switch Lite now at this point is just as good as a Switch is just as good of a idea as the original Switch. Like, even for the Nintendo Switch sports games, there is some assumption there that you can make do to play Nintendo Switch Sports without having the disconnectable Joy-Cons on the Switch Lite. Maybe you have to use a controller, a Pro controller, or maybe you have to get your own separate pair of Joy-Cons extra. But yeah, so far there hasn't been any big warning put out to say that the Switch Sports would absolutely not work unless you have Joy-Cons. Moving on, Live A Live Prehistory and Imperial China short trailers and screenshots are available. Live A Live being a RPG. Wow. Well, yeah, definitely seeing a lot of them, but they're almost always seeing a lot of them. Yeah, it definitely looks like an 8-bit RPG game. And then the Imperial China looks like the same art style, but in a different time. So I have to just assume that Live A Live is a game where you're going to jump all over the place as far as time places and time zones, or time frames. It definitely feels like an old Square Enix game, for sure. And they also have some new Japanese voice cast announcements. That definitely is something Square Enix could be doing. They could be taking Final Fantasy 1 and 2 and just having somebody voice all the lines of dialogue, and not even updating the audio or the visuals, just updating the audio. Let's keep things somewhat fresh and jump around. Let's see. Next, Gamatsu says Grim Grimoire once more has been announced for the PS4 and Switch. This is an enhanced remaster due out July 28th in Japan. It's a real-time strategy game, apparently. I'm not sure this game ever came to the West. I don't recognize this image. Famitsu has its review scores for issue 1741, giving eBaseball 36 out of 40. That's pretty high. Ghostwire Tokyo 37 out of 40. A Hyper Dimension Neptunia Sister vs. Sisters, a pretty mediocre 30 out of 40. Pocky and Rocky Reshrined, 30 out of 40. Tiny Tina's Wonderlands, 36 out of 40. They are still putting out shift codes for Tiny Tina's Wonderlands. Unfortunately, I can't get any of the shift codes. I think maybe that's because it's not on PC yet. That might be the problem. Or it may just be you actually have to own Tiny Tina's Wonderlands and launch it once before you can activate any of the shift codes. Then Yomawari 3 was given 29 out of 40. That's pretty low. Yomawari 3 demo launches April 14th in Japan. This was one of those games that looks like it is very much a horror game, and it's possible that there's some fandom behind it, but if the reviews are bad for it also, it may very well mean that there's just nothing that interests anybody around that. And we had already talked about Melty Blood and videos and trailers, but apparently they put out even more videos and trailers of fights. Are you gonna let me play? I guess I need to click and actually play. Destroy all attack position monsters. Let's see. Nothing. Just go ahead and summon that. And then activate this. And we'll do a pathetic 100 damage. Moving on, Gamatsu says the roguelike horror game Paper Cut Mansion is coming to basically everything in 2022. Don't know if this one has been announced before. I don't recognize it. Might be something, it might be nothing. And at this point, I don't feel like I have extra time to watch trailers. It's already been 3 hours and 20 minutes. The Loot River Loot Overview trailer is available according to Gamatsu. Loot River might be a spin on the idea of Loop Hero, or it might just be completely unconnected. It's from the publisher Super Hot Presents, not the creators of Super Hot. That game Loop Hero, or Giant Bomb was talking about it a lot. and then people stopped talking about it, or Giant Bomb stopped talking about it. I guess the problem is there's my only source of information really is Giant Bomb. But yeah, it did seem like Loop Hero was going to be fairly popular for a little bit longer than it was, and people got bored of it fairly quickly. That very well may be the simplistic nature of the game or the simplistic visuals of the game. Moving on, No Man's Sky Outlaws update is now available. People still getting content for No Man's Sky. Like, honestly, No Man's Sky probably is the most relevant game to go back and potentially play 10 years in, or even longer, whenever I get around to it. Like, normally I would not think it a smart move to try and play a game that's just constantly being updated, but they definitely put a lot of effort into it and are trying to make a better experience, and I almost feel like it would be fair to make a special note of that and celebrate that effort. I think we'd already talked about this, but Aspire Media, subsidiary of Embracer Group, has acquired Beamdog, which they're not really saying anything else there. Epic Games has entered into a multi-game publishing agreement with Aquarius. The contract covers, quote, full unannounced multi-platform games. Aquarius made a game called Wonderbox the Adventure Maker and Horizon Chase, neither of which I've heard of, so this may not be anywhere as big of a deal as it might be if they had entered into a multi-game publishing agreement with, say, Platinum Games. Well, that would be a much bigger announcement in my mind. Let's see. And then Gamatsu has the same article, digital only QuakeCon set for August 18th through the 20th. Quote, we're committed to returning to our full in-person festival in 2023, they say. Here they have a double quotation mark for no reason. A couch co-op game called Spaceship, or it's a couch co-op spaceship recovery game called Fueled Up, has been announced for the PS4, Xbox One, and PC. Oddly skipping out on the PS5, the Xbox Series, and the PlayStation and the Nintendo Switch. Yep. This game looks a lot like FTL. I probably would not have the patience to play a new game that is very similar to FTL. I'd like to try it, certainly, but I could see myself getting bored with it very, very quickly and just saying, alright, I've already experienced 60 to 200 hours of FTL. I don't want to experience another 200 hours of an FTL clone. But that being said, Rogue Legacy 2 is about out, and I'm more than willing to try and play all of Rogue Legacy 2, which could be another 200 hours of about the same game. I guess maybe a difference there is in the fact that an FTL clone versus FTL 2 would just feel different to me. And so if they did come out with an FTL 2, that would be a different consideration. unless this works way better than I think it is going to, I think I'm doomed. I feel like the music that's been playing has been limited to fewer songs. Like, Yu-Gi-Oh! Master Duel has gotten rid of a couple of the operatic songs. Because I just don't feel like I've been hearing that one. Anyways, we were doing some more follow list cleanup. Rift Adventure, September 2021. I'm going to give this one a little bit more time, but I don't know if I really should. Here we have one called Riding Seas from January 2022, which I'll give some more time to. Also, Ionia. Is it out of early access? Yes, it's a VR game now. It's mostly positive. Yeah, this looks a lot better for a puzzle world in a VR environment. A Myst-like type game. That looks very, very good, so I'll definitely leave that on the follow list. Unfortunately, it can't go any further. Rhythm of the Gods, on the other hand, is from 2020, and yeah, I don't even know why this is on the follow list. Sometimes I wonder if some of these games that were on the follow list are actually different games than what I was putting on the follow list in the first place, because some games do get delisted completely from Steam. And maybe they reuse the app IDs. Now, Ream 3 SE. This Ream series is trying to be like Myst, but it really never has enough relevancy for me to say yes to it. I think one of the things to definitely consider is that there might be like one or two really good there might be one more good game from like Cyan, the makers of Myst, that eliminates any desire to play any more Myst games. Okay, so of the festival stuff where we have 8 days left, we have been able to do all of this fairly quickly, which eliminates one thing. We have been able to do some of this, but not all of this as far as normal summoning monsters. Let's see. Destroying monsters on the opponent's field. We haven't been able to do too much of that. And we have definitely dueled 10 times in the exhibition. What we have noticeably not done is played in ranked at all. And so we've got a stack of quite a few ranked things that need to be done, on top of which I need to spectate, and I'll just spectate off screen. It's far as the dual pass is going, we are past the 50 point and working our way to 2/3 of the way being complete. These festivals, though, really are not the events that you would expect that would push you to opening packs or building a bunch of new decks. We jumped quite a bit from, we were about at 3,500 gems. We're now at nearly 6,000 gems. We still are not at the point, though, where I can get those bonus packs. So unless I was supposed to like buy a 10 pack of master pack duel cards, which really see a reason why I would want to do that. And we've already got a decent amount of this select pack and a decent amount of this select pack. We're once again at a weird situation where I don't really have a justification to I don't know what this means. Paid 105, you get 5 free. I guess that's what it means. Don't really have a justification to spin gems. Definitely don't have a justification to buy gems. Yu-Gi-Oh! Master Duel doing a kind of great job not pushing you to the screen. It's pretty easy to forget it even exists. We have lost a bundle sale that was available, and so I wouldn't be surprised if they do put out a gem bundle sale eventually again. But at the moment, they seem like they don't even really want your money. Although I'm almost certain that is not true. Moving on, we have a Resol Index Lite, which is some kind of soccer in VR. 100% positive from January. I think I'm going to leave this one on the fall list, even though it doesn't really have the relevancy issue. Here we have a game called Revita, which is apparently a roguelite. Is it in early access still? Yes, it is. From March 2021. Well, that was a quick victory. I will take that quick victory and be more than happy to accept that and see if we can run forward and do more. Here we have a game on Steam called Revenants, which looks like it's kind of a low polish VR horror game. It's early access from December. I'm gonna say no to that. It's really not the kind of game I'd even want to play, so I don't know why it was on the follow list. Here we have one from February that still needs more time. Here we have Return of the Phantom as a point-and-click adventure game. Yep, and I definitely would have to just make an executive decision on this, because it'll never be relevant enough. I'm just going to go ahead and put this on the wish list since I'm a sucker for point-and-click adventures. It's pretty expensive though, as a game. Or as an old point-and-click adventure game. Let's see. Next we have a game called Retrograde from May 25th, 2021. It has only one review and it's not particularly well received. Yeah. I think we have to say no to this one. Then we have a game called Retro Machina, which is some kind of puzzle game. I do think my monitor, to get back to that, I do think my old monitor was broken. But I honestly also need to move the furniture to check, because the flickering that I was seeing may be still happening, and I may just not be turning enough to the left to look at my monitor. I'm not really watching it very much because it's a 90-degree head turn instead of more of a 45-degree head turn. Of course, that has nothing to do with Retro Machina, which I'll add to the wish list. Here we have another Ziggurat game called Retro Classic Wizard's Fire. I think we can say no to that. A lot of these Ziggurat games, just not relevant enough. Not games I played when I was a kid. Whereas Retro Classic Super Burger Time, on the other hand, I think I will put on the wish list because I think there might be just barely enough relevancy here. Although again, it may not be really worth even the $350 for the price. Like, some of these Ziggurat games definitely feel like they're asking a high price. Add that to my hand. Activate this. Let's see, Retro Classics Night Slashers here is mostly negative. And that might be because these Ziggurat people are just putting emulators and ROMs up, and they're not doing anything more to it. This kind of looks like a game that a remake could have been made of. And that could have been fairly decent. To bring back something that most people have never even heard of, called Night Slashers. But I'm going to stick with mob rule, and if it's mostly negative, I'm going to say no. Retro Classics Joe and Mac Returns. Yeah, I just don't know if I need to play this. So I'm gonna leave it on the fall list. Retro Classics Bad Dudes. Again, I think I'll just leave it. I have to actually play here if I'm gonna try and win. I definitely remember playing this game in arcades, but I don't know if that particularly means they're good games. Actually, I think they're probably pretty awful. Retention, a love story here. It's mostly negative, so that can leave the fall list. Rest House 2. I don't know if it's out yet, even. It's in early access, so I guess I'll give Rest House 2 more time. Here we have one called Resifist. which came out September 30th, 2021. I don't know if this should stay on the fall list. 99 cents for what looks like a beat 'em up game. And it's making a lot of references and putting in a lot of quotes, comparing it to completely different types of games. Yeah, it's a little insulting in the trailer to compare yourself a game that looks like this to God of War, for instance. And there is no relevancy here, so I'm going to take this off the fall list. Next we have Resolution, which is a top-down twin-stick shooter, and it's mixed reviewed. So I'm going to just remove that from the fall list. Meanwhile, I'm also winning somehow. And then we have a game here called Residual, which is also mixed reviewed from Apogee Entertainment. So that'll leave the fall list. Almost everything left the fall list in that group of games. And so that's going to leave me with the GameDeveloper.com articles, and this will hopefully be the last game we play. I think this will be. I don't have to say hopefully. And as such, we can wrap this up since this has been 3 hours and 45 minutes already. We had already talked about this, but GameDeveloper.com has embraced a group acquiring the Baldur's Gate developer Beamdog, which is a better descriptor of telling me who Beamdog is. That's just the page. Meta, formerly known as Facebook, has confirmed that Horizon Worlds creators must pay fees up to 47.5% to sell virtual goods, which is pretty much destroying the idea of making a metaverse, which is what I assume Horizon Worlds is, as a ridiculous fee schedule from the sounds of it. Remember that most content creators and game developers are upset when it's a 30% cut. Let's see, Bungie is going digital first and says remote work is here to stay, according to GameDeveloper.com. We already talked about Nintendo buying the land opposite of its Kyoto headquarters to build a new research and development facility. Arguably, I think this is probably a pretty tall building, having even 10 stories, or about 10 stories. Whereas Nintendo could have been definitely a skyscraper office building if they wanted to hire more people and put everybody in the same offices. I guess there may not be that many skyscrapers in Japan because the commuting. No, I don't know why there wouldn't be so many skyscrapers. Maybe they just don't want to ruin the skyline, which is as good a reason as any. activate spells. Then Activision Blizzard has hired a new head of diversity, equity, and inclusion. We had already talked about this, but I don't like the idea of that being a phrase. I don't know what the right phrase is, but DIE, because that's what it's going to come down to, is diversity, DIEI, or DIE, or even DEI. It's like human resources is a terrible name for what that actually is. If human resources even need to exist at all, the phrase human resources is a problem. But it certainly is a mouthful to say diversity, equity, and inclusion as far as making up titles. Let's see. I frankly would be better to just say head of fairness. Apparently Richard Garriott, the creator of Ultima, is making an NFT powered MMO. We'll see how well that works. That might work better than most NFT efforts, but only slightly. GameDeveloper.com has this report that says almost half of Russian game industry workers are leaving the country. Russian invasion of Ukraine might be causing game developers to go abroad. Of course, the question really comes down to how. How are they leaving the country? Are they lying and saying that they're leaving the country when they really aren't? Or is there some country that would take in Russian workers at this moment? And would Russia let its citizens leave at this moment? I definitely question whether maybe there weren't so many Russian employees in Russia as we might have thought. In the same way that Americans in the United States outsource to India, I wouldn't be surprised if there were a lot of Russian companies that were outsourcing to India, China, other countries for a lot of their programming. And that certainly could be a way. If you were working for a Russian company remotely but didn't live in Russia, you could then move to a different company and work for a different company. On the other hand, this could just be straight up nonsense report or propaganda too. So it doesn't really make much of a difference though from a game player's perspective, because I have not a long list of good Russian video game developers out there. I don't know if there's even a single Russian game company that exists that makes good video games, Russian or otherwise. All I see on Steam is the vast majority of just low effort games that support the Russian language, and then perhaps incorrectly I assume are being made by low effort Russian troll game developers that are either laundering money or just bad at making games. I'm gonna have to play off screen some more, obviously, to get more daily quests done. Let's see, we have 2 more articles. This should be the final nail in the coffin, in my opinion, as far as any video games ever succeeding, or people thinking video games might have succeeded in communist China. The Chinese government has approved its first new game release since last July. It's been over a year that legally, technically, no new game has been allowed to be sold or released in China. That is a massive level of censorship. You can chalk it certainly up to just incompetent governance on the part of China, and that they just simply were not equipped to be the censor board they needed to be to actually allow any games. But it doesn't matter one way or the other, really. Like, video games will never catch up in China. Game developers will never be given the proper motivation to be as good as they should be because of Chinese censorship and Chinese tight control. And if anything, this is a prime example of why censorship is bad. It has literally destroyed an entire industry in the largest country on the planet, geographically speaking at least, or most populous country on the planet. And that's really just ridiculous. Anyways, our final GameDeveloper.com article says Epic Games has invested in the Wonderbox developer Aquarius, which we had already talked about that also. Right, so then that is going to leave me just going through 56 new tweets. Yeah, it has definitely been a long stream. As it were. We're starting to see more of a evolution, I think, in part from the kind of anti-work movement, or the just great realization of how bad working for some companies have been. We're starting to see a lot of companies try to absolutely say we're ending remote working. You have to come back to the office, and a lot of people saying nope, we're not coming back to the office, we'd rather quit. And so there is this actual give and take that probably still is not on equal footing, but it's starting to become a little bit better for workers as far as actual demands. I wouldn't be surprised if over the course of the next few years you start to see entire unions form up and demand remote working. Most of the time when a boss or a manager wants people to come back into the office, it is because the boss is ill at ease in the fact that he really wasn't doing much, and he's trying to cover his own butt and prove that his job is necessary, which we've known. It's been blatantly obvious for decades that most management structures have become incredibly bloated as far as having a boss above a boss above a boss. It's just unnecessary. And that it's been well known for decades that most meetings that happen are wastes of everybody's time. Yeah, I think we will see a lot more remote workers happening, particularly in creative fields. Although there are definitely some cases where getting together and working collaboratively kind of makes sense. Like, I wouldn't expect a marketing team to remotely work or as easily move towards remote working. They probably still could do it. Working in a factory is going to pretty much preclude remote working. Working on an assembly line is going to preclude that. A lot of IT jobs certainly could be remote work, and And although some really can't be, there's going to be some pushback on all of that. The biggest news, it looks like that's new and is probably worth us talking about, is a Bloomberg article here saying that a California lawyer has quit over an allegation that Gavin Newsom has meddled in the Activision Blizzard case. The chief counsel for the Department of Fair and Equitable Housing was fired. The assistant resigned in protest. The DFEH sued Activision over sexual harassment and discrimination. I assume this is Gavin Newsom. I'm not 100% sure who Gavin Newsom is. This Bloomberg article, by the way, is written by Jason Schreier, who people seem to believe is actually a good writer when it comes to video game news. I'm not sure if I 100% believe him. And immediately when I went to this Bloomberg article told me that I've hit my one article limit, which is bull because I have not looked at any Bloomberg article recently. Is it one article limit per year? If these allegations are true, what is this symbol supposed to be? There's some kind of smiley face or something. Well, here's it again. If these allegations prove to be true, that would certainly be interesting. You can never see, as a Bloomberg article, this is a fairly long article. Apparently, this is also with assistance by Paige Smith, so I don't know if Paige Smith really wrote this article and Jason Schreier is just taking the byline. I guess Gavin Newsom is the governor. I wouldn't be surprised if Gavin Newsom personally knows Bobby Kotick as being two rich old white guys. And he did pull some strings. But any allegation needs to be proven before we can really believe anything. So it's an interesting twist. Certainly, it may not be anything really, though, in the long run. Again, I've pretty much had a perfect stream. No computer programs, no computer problems, or anything like that. Just a very long stream. So I'm not going to belabor it any further. That's going to be it for this recording. As always, I ask you to like, share, subscribe, comment, and watch every second of my videos. If you want to friend or follow me on any social media sites, there's a bunch of links down below. And if you want to support me further, there's a link to Patreon, or you can friend me on Steam and gift me a game off my wish list. Thank you for watching. Have a good evening.